you're in the right place to have your voice heard and to discuss some of the most pressing challenges for our species, especially the female members or those of us who identify as female in our species that we're currently pressed with today. I'd like to give a huge thank you to the organizers of the NGO Forum of CSW 65, and a huge shout out to Devin and Hori, two of the key organizers in this effort. In our time this afternoon, we're going to do some introductory work, set some context, then lift up some resources to frame our sharing. But the most important part is, for a good 30 minutes, we're going to be in breakout rooms for each of you to share your voice and be listening to each other. We have people here from all around the world, which is a wonderful opportunity. Then we're going to share about some of what came up in breakout rooms, come back together and focus on next steps and look ahead to generation equality. By way of introduction, just my co-host and I will introduce ourselves and a few other members of our team, and then we'll start sharing some great resources with you. Once again, my name is Beth Blissman. I am the UN representative for the US-based Loretto community. I'm coming to you today from the unceded lands of the Erie peoples in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm deeply grateful to be co-facilitating with my new friend, Gian, who's going to talk to us about how land acknowledgement is done in Australia. Gian, turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gian, and I'm an IBVM youth advocate in Sydney, Australia. I am a university student. And in Australia, as well as is practiced in some other countries, we like to acknowledge the Indigenous unceded land that we are on as a way of acknowledging past colonial injustices. So with that, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners of the country on which I'm meeting with you from today, and recognize their continuing tradition to land, waters, and culture. I acknowledge that the sovereignty to the land has never been ceded. I also pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend this respect to any Indigenous peoples present here today. I also welcome you all to type your acknowledgements or where you're from in the chat, as it is a global conversation circle taking place on Indigenous lands all over the world. Thank you all for acknowledging the lands that you're coming from and for showing the lands that we're in an interrelationship with. I see in the chat we have Kansas City, and we have some names. We have South Africa and Connecticut. Yes, please feel free to keep on typing where you're from in the chat. I think that it's really conducive to show how international this conversation and this issue is. So now it's time to review some of the ground rules that we'll be having and some safety guidelines. And for that, I'm going to be turning over to Janet, if you'd like to begin.
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Good evening. I am Janet Palafox, the NGO representative to the United Nations of the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I join you from Guringai country in Sydney, Australia. I too pay my respects and gratitude to elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Indigenous people living on this land. We are expecting over 250 of us to be here today. So our hope is that all of you will have a positive and enriching experience in this conversation circle. Let us keep this a safe place for all participants to share their views and opinions. I would like to remind you of some of the guidelines and principles that NGO CSW New York has for the forum to ensure that we have a safe environment founded on respect and inclusivity. Let us use welcoming and inclusive language at all times and commit to open dialogue and transparency. Remember that we are here because we are committed to advancing gender equality, feminism, and women's rights. Let us build a culture of excellence, compassion, integrity, and honesty. Respect one another. Listen actively without interrupting and avoid assumptions. Critique ideas, not people. Enable different opinions. Build people's ideas up rather than knocking them down, and refrain from personal attacks. We can all agree to disagree and remain respectful. Allow everyone the chance to speak. Don't dominate the conversation and honor time limits. Let us all respect our diversity of languages, opinions, and expertise, while acknowledging that in our society at the moment, sexism, racism, classism, heterosexism, transphobia, global north domination, and other institutionalized forms of oppression exist. We are accountable to each other. This is a space where the voices of the marginalized are amplified and given expert priority when recounting their own experiences. Their experiences of oppression are not up for debate or to be refuted in any way. This is also an anti-racist space, meaning that we welcome, value, and revere an intersectional approach to feminism. We all have different experiences. An anti-racist space requires that all of us need to consider our positionality and work actively not to replicate white patriarchal structure, including subjugating voices of Black women and women of color and other marginalized groups. We will not tolerate harassment of any kind, including offensive comments, intimidation, and sustained disruption of discussion. If you have experienced any form of harassment or encountered a hostile online environment in this conversation, please report the experience to Virtual Safety at NGO CSW.org or to any one of us co-hosts in this event. Thank you, and I now hand you back to Beth, who will provide a brief overview of a much larger conversation. Thank you. Beth?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Janet. And welcome, everyone. I see that people are still coming in from the waiting room. We're so grateful you're here. Once again, my name is Beth Blissman. I'm the NGO representative for the Loreto community. And you are here at the CSW 65 Conversation Circle on Feminist Action for Climate Justice. And for those of you who might be new to the CSW space, it stands for the Commission on the Status of Women. This is the 65th one that has ever happened. In fact, if you are new, or even if you're not, feel free to put into chat whether or not this is your first CSW or your 5th or your 10th. And I'm curious to see if we have anyone who may have even been at Beijing in 1995, 26 years ago. The Commission on the Status of Women is a commission of 46 countries, and different countries are chosen for it and serve on 4-year terms. And they have a mandate to prepare recommendations that can shape global standards on women's rights in political, economic, civil, social, and educational fields, and ecological sanity in many ways, whether or not women have access to clean air, clean water, viable food. CSW also exists to document the reality of women's lives throughout the world, and we'll have time in the conversation circle today when we do the breakout rooms to hear about what's happening on the ground. CSW monitors and reviews progress and problems in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and the Beijing Platform for Action, which 25 years on is still the most progressive policy document we have globally for the rights of women and girls. Some things have moved forward in great ways in the past quarter of a century, but we still have a very long way to go. And we're so grateful you're here to help with that conversation and moving things forward. Finally, the Commission on the Status of Women also is charged with ensuring that the UN system itself is compliant with the highest standards for gender equality, and that the UN itself, through its own activities, reports, etc., gives due to women and gender analysis. So we're part of that larger conversation. We're one of 10 conversation circles occurring this year during the Non-Governmental Organization Forum of the Commission on the Status of Women. And in fact, if we could go to the next slide, Devin, in our particular topic, feminist action for climate justice, here are just a few of the linkages of what women and girls experience all around the world. For example, in the lower right, displacement, we actually have data that documents that forced migration is actually something that exacerbates girls' vulnerability in the world. I know of many women, even here in the United States of America, where I'm based, who are dealing with water scarcity in the country that calls itself the preeminent democracy globally, and we still have issues of water scarcity. It's a challenging time. But crop failures, fuel shortage, conflict, disease, natural disaster, all of these are situations in which girls and women are more vulnerable. And as we tell those stories and work to get more women's voices into the fray, because of course this year the main theme of CSW is women's participation and political action and involvement, as well as ending violence against women and girls, we need to be telling the stories, documenting the data, disaggregating the data. There's lots that needs to be done. Fortunately, after this year's Commission on the Status of Women, we'll be moving into what's called the Generation Equality Forum. And that's the next slide, Devin. If we could just briefly post that up, we will come back and talk more about what generation equality is towards the end of our time together today, and how one can get involved in generation equality and the different action coalitions that are emerging. But please know that this is part of a much larger context, and this is but one conversation among many. So there will be time for your voice today, and there will be time to continue contributing your voice after this. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Pamela Morgan, who's going to talk to us about a wonderful, new, and totally free resource that will be helpful to you as we have these conversations. Pamela, the floor is yours.
Pamela, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Beth. I'm pleased to be able to share with you today the Women's Human Rights Teaching, Learning, and Advocacy resource referred to as Whitler, an academic tool promoting equality through education, advocacy, and action. First, I would like to speak for a bit about the Feminist Women's Movement Action Plan, or FWMAP, as we most often refer to it. FWMAP is driven by the perspective of local activists to define a transformative agenda that calls for profound structural changes in all spheres: political, economic, social, and cultural, and as a countermove to the political backlash and organized attempts to roll back women's human rights. The aim is to create a series of global dialogues, taking a multidisciplinary and cross-cutting approach to a range of issues that are relevant to women's lives. These dialogues aim to explore and define the profound structural changes that are needed for the realization of women's rights as human rights, keeping in mind that this will also require holding the international community, governments, and local authorities to account. So now we're going to talk about the Whitler Initiative, which was formed in 2020 by a group of volunteers from civil society, higher education, and they were working together with FWMAP to prepare curricula to support the CSW 65 and Generation Equality Forum. The result is this collection of resources that are adaptable across context to help educators, community organizers, and self-motivated learners gain insight on the greatest challenges to creating an equitable and flourishing society. The Women's Human Rights Teaching and Advocacy resource was created by a group of 50 academics who spent 6 months working in teams developing 42 teaching modules, and it was intense. Each theme is comprised of an overview module and up to 10 subtopic modules that address the key components of the theme. The modules follow a standard, easy-to-follow format that is designed to engage and educate leaders and learners while assisting instructors by adhering to academic standards. This is a collection of resources, activities, and guidance that explores issues that affect the lives of women and girls around the world. It was developed because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to understand existing international women's human rights mechanisms and ground claims to women's human rights and legally binding obligations and political commitments so that there can be an effective bottom-up movement to change women's lives for the better. This is a working document that makes the Human Rights Declaration, Beijing Platform for Action, CEDAW, and the SDGs the cornerstones of women's rights applicable and accessible to educators and advocates. It's a valuable resource for generation equality forums, for Beijing Plus 25 university presidents, faculty, administrators, students, and youth movements, civil society, and researchers. It's for everyone. It's going to make a difference by breaking silos and providing online access to a working document about women's human rights that is grounded in globally recognized precedents for women's human rights studies, public health experts, environmentalists, future business administrators, journalists, school administrators, mayors and city council, women and youth groups, media, and cultural innovators. The compendium contains learning modules for each of the following 6 thematic areas: inclusive development, shared prosperity, and decent work; poverty eradication, social protection, and social services; freedom from violence, stigma, and stereotypes; participation, accountability, and gender-responsive institutions; peaceful and inclusive societies; and the last, environmental conservation, protection, and rehabilitation. The learning modules are structured to facilitate the teaching and learning process as follows. In each module, you'll find an introduction, learning outcomes, preparation, key terms and definitions, key documents, and instructional options, which may include suggested activities as lecture, read and discuss, case studies, etc. Additional references, resources, which are often bibliographies of relevant text, are also included. This compendium gives the instructional leader a toolkit that is similar to that found in a standard lesson plan. It's really like instant soup where you only have to add the water, where in this case, the instructor is the water. Devin, next slide, please. Our focus today is on the last module, Environmental Conservation, Protection, and Rehabilitation, which has 6 subtopics. Subtopic number 1, Environment, Women as Environmental Defenders, which includes key conventions and agreements, and a case study and interactive exercises that will help the learner to fully understand the concept of women as environmental defenders. Subtopic 2, Food Systems, looks at the effects on women and girls, and it provides a historical and somewhat scientific context for the study of food systems. It offers 2 case studies, as well as a host of additional resources and a plan for action. Subtopic 3, Climate Change and Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. And as the title implies, it examines the intersection of climate change and the effects on sexual and reproductive health, looking at issues caused by the lack of access due to climate-induced calamities. Additionally, they highlight the interconnection of environment and reproductive justice, highlighting the relationship between climate change and sexual and reproductive health through a social justice and human rights-based framework, with a guided discussion and other resources. Subtopic 4, Women, Climate, and Nuclear Disarmament. And this one, I think, is the most novel. And it actually deals with how climate change can cause conflict with potentially devastating outcomes. Suggested methodology includes lecture, case studies, and class suggestions. Environment, subtopic number 5, environmental justice, deals with the way that women are forced to deal with a toxic environment that modern industry has created, and they use video and innovative research options. This subtopic offers a list of women, including Dr. Wangari Maathai and her Greenbelt movement, and Winona LaDuke, who are recognized for their work in environmental justice, and a reference to the feminist Green New Deal as well. And our 6th topic, the effects of climate-induced migration on women and girls, provides a thorough examination of the intersectional understanding of climate-induced migration and women and girls in the context of issues like racism, sexism, classism, poverty, etc. The rise of girl activists in this area is also covered. The subtopic offers a rich assortment of innovative activities to enhance the instructional plan. Again, you'll find that CEDAW, the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, the Kyoto Protocol, and other human rights conventions and treaties are referenced throughout the 6 models as the basis for this area of study. We invite you to fully use this compendium as a rich resource to enhance your discussions regarding women and the climate crisis. Now, while this compendium is important and offers information in ways to reach various learning styles, we invite you to add your content, your case studies, your research, infographics, and other data to this compendium in order to make it a resource that is even more responsive to the needs of women globally. I'll now turn the floor over to Gian to give an intergenerational perspective on the Whitler from a college student's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And further, hello and good morning to everyone else who has joined the call since. I have found so far that from the Whitler resource that it promotes greater equality and feminist actions for climate justice, and it really does explore the importance of advocacy in this area. I think that it could be used from a college perspective as something that's very important to grassroots movements to improve awareness and make the type of tangible change in women's lives that really only comes from broader societal understanding and education. As a young person and someone who's not actively involved in the world of the UN and NGOs, I often struggle to educate myself on issues that are not taught commonly within schools. As an example, I'm sure that not many of us were directly taught the critical link between our context of the health of the earth and the rights and equality of women. To be able to truly act as an environmental defender and to protect women, I feel that we need to have the greater understanding that I think that this resource genuinely provides. It provides an unprecedented access to a working, reliable document about the climate crisis in the context of it being an aspect of the world today that disparatively affects women. And I think that its grounding in women's rights studies, particularly the case studies, are very pertinent in providing real-world examples to young people of why we need action. Having accessible styles of writing that are not academic journals, but still breaking down reliable facts and information is absolutely critical, especially to encouraging greater involvement of young people in the types of movements that we're starting to get into and really need. This effort to connect these UN documents and movements related to the rights of girls and women within the context of the environment is coming at exactly when we need it. It's a time of great change right now, and especially during the pandemic, we've noticed that we need to be able to independently learn and independently access these kind of resources for self-education. It's also helpful to be able to move at your own pace and to work through this heavy information. And therefore, I really encourage all the participants of this conversation circle to share this resource with their networks. Especially because it is a US-based resource, and we could really broaden it with perspectives from all around the world, with all of your different case studies and examples and information. Bringing together all of those perspectives we've shown is what is absolutely critical to making a difference in this issue. And it really is a valuable resource for education and awareness that I've found so far. And it's something that is very simple to share, but can make a big difference if we just have the initiative to look through it, to read, to educate ourselves. That's how we get tangible change and awareness within our society, because we can then help to educate others. So with that in mind, I hope that you all do engage with it. And the next order of business from that will be to introduce our conversation circles for today and our breakout rooms. We will be having around eight people per breakout room, and we will be discussing the questions that are currently on the PowerPoint. Please do select someone to take notes. We hope that everyone from this will have an increased understanding of the issues that we're discussing today. And we hope that everyone will feel open to discuss the questions. Just as a bit of a starter, we do suggest that in your breakout room, you establish who is the youngest person in the room. And then we think that the youngest person should introduce themselves first and give their first thought on the case studies question, so no one feels too awkward. And if you are comfortable with it, we would like everyone to go around within your group and introduce your name and your pronouns if you're comfortable with that. So with that being said, let's get into the breakout rooms. Thank you, everyone.
Just a reminder, you should have something popping up on your screen right now asking you to join the breakout room. And I think you just have to click yes to join. If you accidentally press the wrong thing, feel free to stay here and we will get you reassigned. I have done that before. We have a few people who have not yet had an invite appear for them. Please be patient, as Devin is working hard right now to get everyone into breakout rooms. We promise we will get you into a room. And I'm hoping you'll be able to see the questions once you get into the room. If not, we'll try and put them up one by one. So thank you for your patience.